And Quinlan's here. Happy New Year to you.
Same to you, Ger.
It's pretty good for the Leinster fans, but the Munster fans must be feeling a little bit, things need to change pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it's obviously, and the game at the weekend was very, very disappointing to say the least. I was pretty optimistic on Friday, thinking that they could go and put in a good performance and run Ulster close. Ulster only had 3 changes in their side, and probably had the luxury, the way the fixtures fell. They sent a second string, third string academy down to Leinster, the RDS in the one before Christmas, and then they did 2 home games where they walloped Connacht and beat Munster really well in that last game on Friday. So the fixtures felt good from that, and obviously they'd only Henderson and Stockdale out of their group, so they've had a bit of consistency in selection, but that doesn't take away from their performance. I think they've played a lot of really, really good rugby. Dan McFarlane's done a brilliant job with them. The pace to their game, the accuracy has really, really improved, and they're a team that we've all probably had a cut off in the last couple of seasons, but they're doing very, very well.
Yeah, they're doing great, and they're good to watch. And part of it is that they have a 9 who they trust to be a game maker and to run things through.
Yeah, and obviously he's played very well for him. He's a really good footballer. There's a real spring and energy in his step. He's quick. But it's probably, and it's a strange thing to say, because Ulster's set piece hasn't been great. Their line out and their scrum has creaked a bit, and but
that makes it all the more impressive, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But I think where he's profiting from is their carries are very, very dominant, and their efficiency around the breakdown has improved tenfold, I think. One of the things that we spoke about Ulster for a lot in the last couple of years was lack of ball carriers. They now have a number of carriers who are getting over the gain line. The ball is quick. Cooney bounces in and out of the breakdown, and his delivery is very good. So on the flip side of that, Conor Murray is kind of struggling because it's a dogfight a lot of the time to get the ball back. Now, that doesn't take away from the fact that he looks a little bit unsettled. He looks a little bit unhappy in himself. I'm not saying he is and that there's something going on, but I just think he's probably a little bit frustrated. And sometimes when you're chasing kind of really good performances...
And isn't that the thing? Like, some players have World Cup hangovers that are different from everybody else's, and like, you just have to accept that in a way. That, like, I'm not saying that you accept a lower standard of play from what we're used to, but like, different players respond to different things different ways.
What no one should accept from Munster anyways is your pack going to Belfast and being bullied around the field, and I think it's very hard for Conor Murray to play well behind that. And I think a lot of the games, they're getting parity. Maybe some games they're probably losing the battle and still doing okay in other games, but there's no dominance there from his pack in front of him, and it's very difficult for him to play well then and get his confidence, because it's a bit of a battle all the time. So when you're kind of struggling a little bit with form, you kind of relying as a scrum half on the front, the guys in front of you, to deliver good ball so that you can try and make a few line breaks, that you can kind of run with the ball. He hasn't really had any opportunities to make a line break. His defensive cover, his work rate is very, very, very good still, but I just think it's that bit of zip and getting the ball away and making some breaks.
The harsh question that Andy Farrell will be asking himself is, if you put John Cooney into Conor Murray's shoes on Friday night, would he have done a better job than Conor Murray did?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. It's probably because I think he's probably full of confidence at the moment. He believes he can do anything. He's kicking goals, he's in touchline clearances, he's making line breaks. I think his anticipation, and when somebody makes a break, that was kind of an upfield run that he made for that try where they got a little bit of space in the outside. So it's like a striker in soccer on, I think, when you're sometimes you don't have to do a lot and you just make a little break and the ball falls to your feet and stuff, and that's happening at the moment. And Conor Murray's had that year in 2018 where lots of things stick for him, and it's just not happening at the moment. So he's got to stick in there. He's a very, very strong character, and I played with him towards the end of my career, and we always looked in awe at this young guy coming through because he was an incredible athlete. And he's just suffered a little bit. I think he's he's taken a lot of. There's been a lot of kind of disappointing results in the last 12 months with Munster and with Ireland. So
do you just play through that? Do you take some time off? Do you give him?
It's up to Andy Farrell now. I think that if you're going to pick on form, you know, it's probably John Cooney deserves a shot. You know, you can, as a coach, you can go and pick someone you can pick Conor, and he could be brilliant against Scotland and Wales and start. But that's the kind of risk that we spoke about, that Joe took with a lot of the Irish players heading to the World Cup. So I think we need to change that mentality a little bit now and throw a little bit of caution to the wind. And I think you can put Conor Murray on the bench and bring him off, and that could reinvigorate him or re-energise him, if you like. But that's not to say that he won't start. Conor Murray could easily start and be really good for Ireland. But I think if you're going to reward form, I think John Cooney is the one that deserves a shot at it.
Johan van Graan wasn't a happy man after the game on Friday. No. It's probably a combination of things. Obviously, the performance they put in Belfast, but also, I guess, the load management from the IRFU. Munster have been hit relatively hard by that, harder than, say, a team like Ulster would have been over the festive period. It's not really something he can have too many concerns with, because he knew what he was getting into when he takes the Munster job.
Yeah, and it's probably a little bit of... they have been hit hard. It's probably the depth as well of the next level coming through. I think you could talk about Leinster and their depth, and we speak about that all the time. Leo Cullen's in a very, very good position that way with a lot of his players that are coming through. But there is some good young players coming through at Munster. Gavin Coombs came on the other night. He's a very good prospect. Jack O'Sullivan, Shane Daly at fullback. So there's a couple of guys you can name, but it's very difficult then when the whole team is under pressure and you know, it doesn't matter who you have in the back line, in my opinion, if your forwards are getting beaten.
Why are the forwards getting beaten?
Because they're not, some of them are not good enough. And that's the harsh reality of it. Some of them are underperforming. Some of them are out of form. And it just takes one or two, Jerry, in any team, or three, to make a couple of mistakes, just be a little bit off, and that kind of snowballs. And it makes it more difficult. And then you're playing away from home, you're playing a crowd baying for blood, a team full of confidence. So little things, because they started the game well, Munster, to be fair to them. And I just thought, you know, they just didn't impose themselves. They didn't have any ball carriers. They didn't make hard yards. They didn't win the collisions. And, you know, I think I heard some people talking about desire. And there is a desire part to it as well. But there's just a bit of pride in it as well. That, you know, look, a few things went wrong on them and a couple of mistakes.
Desire and pride are going to be all well and good. If you've no ball carriers, if you don't have the right players...
Well, they didn't carry the ball the other night. You know, there's some of them well able to carry the ball, and they were a little bit naive in the way they tried to play the game. Ulster just fanned out and just smashed them and were up for the fight a little bit more, which is very disappointing. And I've always said this, my biggest criticism of Munster, any Munster team over the years, is if you're not up for the fight when you put on that jersey, it's a problem. It's a problem for me, and it's a problem for anyone who's ever worn the jersey. And like I said, I'm not sitting here saying I was perfect in any of my performances. I often needed a kick up the backside myself. But, you know, there is a responsibility, and that message has to keep kind of going. And you talk about standards week after week. I think that fight just wasn't strong enough the other night. And look, there is a little bit of quality issue there at times when you go down the levels. So
it wasn't missing against Leinster, though. It was just a little bit of brain power at the end.
But it's a confidence thing, Ger. So if they get a result against Leinster, you know, you get a surge of confidence there.
If they got a draw against Leinster, I think
you can take something out of it. And look, there's small margins in that game. You look back at the video, there's a couple of things that just went against them, and it's probably down to their own application, losing the ball, turning it over, just being a bit passive. Guys
in the Ulster game,
guys getting isolated, discipline was poor. They're just making it difficult for themselves, and that's the stuff they look back at.
Can they fix it for a trip to Paris to play?
Look, it's very difficult because they're on a run of two wins and 7. There's 1 draw and they're on 4 losses. So confidence is a big thing, and it's the energy that it can kind of create, and you can bounce off each other. There's still a lot of character there, and there's a lot of pride in guys who want to play and want to go. Their season is on the line, effectively. They go to Racing against a side who were fantastic in Thomond Park, and they're star-studded side with a lot of top-quality internationals. So it's going to be very, very difficult. But it's probably not the most daunting place in France you can go to. But I think, Racing won't underestimate Munster because they are very wounded now. That one will really sting on Friday night. If you go up there and you lose by 10, 12 points and you're in the fight and you're battering away at the line and you make a couple of mistakes, you can live with that. But I just think it was mid-second half, it was over, and it was right after half time, it was Munster needed to come out and set the tempo, and the opposite happened. They just retreated and played really, really poorly. They'll know that themselves, but they need to be an awful lot better because, I think it would be a real blow if they didn't get. We know before the start of the tournament it was a really hard group with Saracens and Racing, but they look back with a lot of regret on that draw in Limerick. Maybe not getting the losing bonus point in Saracens when they had the kick.
Yeah.
And, they can't have any regrets this weekend. They really need to throw caution to the wind. And they need to speed up the way they play. In one sense, Stephen Larkham is trying to get a bit of width in their game, but then sometimes they retreat back into slow it down. When the pressure comes on, they retreat to box kick, slow it down, one-out runners. They need to bring tempo and pace to their game against in Paris on Sunday, or else they have no chance.
Is that part of the game plan, do you think, the retreating into a slower game plan? Or do you have
I think they want to try and play, and I think I do believe Johan van Gran and Stephen Larkham, and they are trying to change and play with it. But it's down to personnel as well sometimes, Owen. But they do retreat back into where they were under Rassi when, in fairness, he had such an effective kind of 12 months when they made the European semi-final, Pro 14 final in the 2016-17 season, and they kind of retreat back to that. That can only get you so far. Rassi Erasmus played like that with South Africa because he has beasts on the field and monsters to come off the bench. But you've got to play more rugby, and they don't have that physical, imposing. Now, I know Stander will come back and make a massive difference. Klein will. Kilcoyne hasn't a lot of rugby played. He will, start. But I think a lot of their other frontline players really need to step up and take a little bit of ownership this week because, if they go to Paris and make silly errors and get bullied, and when I say bullied, I mean you're losing the 50-50 collisions.
Yeah.
That's going to happen sometimes. It's rugby. You run into your opposite number, he knocks you back. The next time you've got to make sure you react. But they're losing too many of these collisions. So they've got to bring a real anger and accuracy around their ball work. And then Conor Murray has a better chance of playing well, and Carberry. Get him the ball quick. Get the ball into Carberry's hands as quick as you can, because he is someone who can make something happen. Get it to Chris Farrell, get it to Earls, Conway. These are the guys you want to have running in a 4G pitch in Paris on Sunday and actually stretching that Racing defence a little bit and playing with high tempo.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see exactly what happens.
It's a very difficult scenario from now, and odds are that, unless they produce some sort of performance, which we haven't seen recently, they've run out of Europe.
Yeah, and we wait to see what the injury report is like as well, because obviously Conway went off injured in that game. Connacht at the moment have a massive injury crisis. One of the types of injury crisis that, it's so bad that it's remarkable. In rugby, you're going to have a certain number of days every year that you expect your players to be out for, but Connacht are feeling the pinch at the minute. Is there anything that can be done to add a number of players to their playing squad? Is there something that,
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's probably, again, it's a really crucial couple of weeks for them, and they've had a really dreadful kind of run of injuries. They've just mounted up week after week, and a lot of that power and kind of influence up front has been gone. Fainga, Jared Butler, Quinn Rue, Delan was out for a while. They've just had a lot of injuries, number of props out, and they've been really, really stretched. I think you'd have to have empathy for Andy Friend. I think they had 26 fit players to choose from at the weekend, between the player welfare and the injuries scenario, 22 missing. So it's always going to be really difficult for them to go to the RDS and play a side full of confidence. And and belief in themselves and quality as well. So I'm not sure if, because they have a fair number of overseas players, I think whether they get some short-term help, or it depends on how long certain players are out for. But it's a really tough situation. It shows the gap and the difference of where Leinster are at the moment, and Connacht, which is, there was a lot of optimism a number of weeks ago, but Connacht are really being hammered now by those injuries, and they're, it's a legitimate reason why they're really, really struggling at the moment.
Yeah, we've got the game against Toulouse live on Off the Ball on Saturday. Leinster against Lyon is on Sunday. We also have Villa against Manchester City on Sunday as well. So a quick word about Leinster before we go. Like, it's hard to know how good they are at the moment, because they keep hammering teams 40 points up at half-time. They were sensational, but obviously it's a very weakened Connacht side. And their game at the weekend against Lyon, they know exactly that they're already through. They need to get a bonus point. They need to keep racking up the bonus point wins to make sure that they've got home advantage as long as that lasts in the number 1 seed. But they're pretty good at the minute, right?
Yeah, the most impressive thing for me is and I think the other coaches, Johan van Graan was talking about the changes, they're affecting the other provinces more, particularly Connacht and Munster. I think Ulster have had a bit more consistency in selection, as I said, bar that second stroke, third string that is sent down to the RDS.
Which still scored 35 points or 40 points.
Yeah, they did, and I think, well, it can happen when you throw, the opposition dropped their standard a little bit, and a few things went right for them, and they scored tries. And look, they're decent players, and young players coming through will always throw the ball around. But I think the most impressive thing for Leinster is the performance doesn't change when you have the number of changes, and that's down to good coaching, really good application, everybody knowing their job inside out. And I think their biggest strength is the collective, because, and I mean this respectfully, there's no big physical monsters in that Leinster side who would really physically dominate you or hurt you, but what they do and the way they're coached and the accuracy around their carries, their clean-outs, their lines of running is just superb. So
system and culture.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very good players. That doesn't. I'm just saying, there's no big Bruno Pola brother, one of those guys running out over you.
Changed.
Yeah. So it's the system that the players are just have so bought into it so much. They're obviously outstanding players. You look at someone like Will Connors slips into the team the way he started this year. Max Deegan, a couple of weeks ago we were saying Quinlan was outstanding for him in a couple of games, and that he's called into the Irish squad. And I think Max Deegan made 29 tackles the other night, missing on 20 carries, 2 tries.
Does he start when everybody's fit in that back row?
It's phenomenal. I don't know who starts
on.
That's
no
a
one
good
knows.
question. Nobody knows who starts when they're all fit.